Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're embarking on a journey really into how to use EQ to lead better and stress less. This isn't just about understanding emotions on the surface. It's about fundamentally transforming how you approach every interaction, every decision, maybe even your whole leadership style.
Exactly. We're looking beyond just the technical know-how. We want to embrace the profound, often really underestimated impact of emotional intelligence. It's a deep dive into how truly understanding and crucially managing emotions your own. And those of the people around you can shift you from just, surviving the daily grind to actually thriving, both at work and personally.
Right. And you know that feeling, don't you?
Yeah.
When your technical skills, your knowledge just isn't quite enough. Maybe you've felt totally overwhelmed by workplace stress or struggled to genuinely motivate your team, or maybe just hit those frustrating communication snags again and again.
Happens all the time.
So what we'll unpack today is why emotional intelligence isn't some kind of nice-to-have soft skill. It's actually the critical skill set for navigating precisely those challenges. It can empower you, really empower you, to lead with more confidence, build much stronger relationships, and honestly, make clearer, better decisions.
Okay, so let's kick things off with that absolute cornerstone. Know thyself. It sounds almost, deceptively simple. What are some of the deeper layers there? Maybe some common misunderstandings about what it really means.
Well, the real power, I think, lies in recognizing that self-awareness isn't just ticking boxes like happy or frustrated.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating an internal observer,
Yeah.
really watching your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors as they happen in real time. Think of your brain's amygdala like that instant danger alarm.
Quick reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then your prefrontal cortex, the PFC, that's your wise advisor, your rational guide. The deep insight here is actively strengthening that connection between the two. You're quite literally rewiring your brain to choose a thoughtful response over just reacting on impulse. That Harvard Business Review statistic you mentioned earlier is, it's staggering. 95% of people think they're self-aware, but only 10-15% actually are. Wow. It makes you wonder, what are the signs? How do we know if we're in that 95% who think they are, but maybe aren't?
Yeah.
And what's the real world impact of that gap?
Oh, that gap affects us profoundly. Someone who is genuinely emotionally aware, they consider the emotional impact when making decisions. They choose how to respond in conflict instead of just getting defensive. They see feedback, even tough feedback, as a chance to grow. And they build these incredibly authentic connections.
Okay. And the unaware person.
Well, conversely, the unaware individual might rely purely on logic, sometimes rigid logic or just impulse. They might get defensive easily, struggle to really connect with people genuinely. It just highlights why that continuous self-reflection isn't just, a nice idea. It's a strategic necessity.
So practically speaking, to start mastering your emotional patterns, you suggest tuning into your body's signals, like that racing heart before anxiety hits, or maybe a clenched jaw signaling anger. Those are like early warnings.
Exactly. Your body's early warning system. They give you those crucial few seconds to actually intervene before the emotion takes full control. And simple tools like journaling can be incredibly powerful here. Ask yourself things like, what situations consistently trigger strong reactions in me? How does my body feel physically before, during, and after these emotional events? What thoughts typically run through my head when I feel this way? And importantly, how do my reactions impact others? What patterns do I see over time? Think about Jennifer, that marketing professional example. She tracked her presentation anxiety, and she found it linked back to disrupted sleep and even decreased appetite, starting almost 48 hours beforehand. That awareness was gold. It allowed her to put coping strategies in place before the anxiety really gripped her.
That's proactive. And we can also use structured approaches, right? Like the ABC model, identifying the antecedent, the trigger, your behavioral reaction, and the consequence.
Yep, the ABCs. Very useful.
Or the pause method. Pause. Acknowledge the emotion. Understand its roots. Select a response. And engage intentionally. These kinds of frameworks give you a structure, a way to build that understanding methodically.
And let's not forget feedback. Getting feedback from others. Being truly open to how others see things. Listening without immediately jumping to defend yourself. Looking for those recurring themes in what people tell you that can dramatically shrink your blind spots. Improve your decisions. Also, remember, cultural nuances are huge here.
How so?
Well, a Japanese manager might prioritize group harmony above all else in their emotional expression and reading of others, while a Brazilian leader might focus much more on building strong personal rapport, maybe showing more outward emotion. Your emotional read of a situation has to adapt to the cultural context.
That makes sense. So your emotions aren't just random noise. They create a unique signature, like an emotional fingerprint. And that influences every single interaction. You mentioned Marcus, the executive who transformed his temper.
Right. He did it by systematically monitoring his patterns. He noticed his anger consistently spiked in Monday meetings, specifically when project timelines were questioned. So, armed with that knowledge, he implemented a simple pre-meeting reflection routine. That gave her a crucial head start, allowed him to manage it proactively.
So for real transformation, you suggest a three-part framework: physical awareness, emotional recognition, and behavioral patterns.
Exactly. Physical awareness, noticing those subtle shifts, breathing, muscle tension, energy levels. Emotional recognition, not just naming the emotion, but identifying its intensity, its specific triggers, and behavioral patterns. Consciously noting your automatic responses, your go-to communication styles, your decision-making habits under pressure. Think of Elena, the CFO. She used this framework to manage her anxiety during intense board presentations.
How did that work for her?
She learned to recognize the very first physical signals, slight hand tremors, then her breathing getting shallow. Recognizing those early allowed her to proactively use meditation and breathing techniques before the anxiety escalated.
So the goal isn't to eliminate emotions. That's impossible anyway, right? It's about understanding them, channeling them effectively, seeing them as valuable data about your needs, your values, how you're responding.
Precisely. So as you listening or reflecting on this, maybe ask yourself, what emotions tend to drive my decisions? How do my emotional patterns affect my professional relationships, my leadership? Answering those questions honestly is really the start of the journey to leading better and, frankly, stressing less.
Okay, so building on that crucial self-awareness, the real power starts when you move beyond just recognizing emotions. It's about beginning to truly master them. And again, not suppressing feelings,
No, definitely not suppressing.
but recognizing them as they come up, understanding where they're coming from, and then consciously choosing how to respond. It's like converting that nervous energy into focus, or turning frustration into assertive, constructive action.
Right. When we talk about emotional mastery, we mean actively shaping your responses. That relationship we mentioned between your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part, and the amygdala, the emotional alarm system, it's central. Through consistent practice, you literally strengthen the neural pathways connecting them. It's neuroplasticity in action. You're effectively rewiring your brain to respond more effectively, building that emotional muscle.
Which leads to a really critical concept: your window of tolerance. Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. Think of it as your optimal emotional zone. It's the state where you can think clearly, process information rationally, and respond effectively. When intense emotions push you outside that window, your rational thinking kind of goes offline. That's what neuroscientists sometimes call an amygdala hijack. Your emotional brain takes over.
And that hijack can happen incredibly fast.
In a fraction of a second. The amygdala is built for speed. But here's the good news. Consistent practice in emotional regulation widens that window of tolerance. It gives you more capacity to handle stress without getting hijacked.
So people who practice this can actually reduce the intensity, maybe the duration, of those strong emotional reactions. Create a pause.
Exactly. They create that vital pause between the stimulus, whatever triggered the emotion, and their response. Think of Laura, the COO example. She learned to monitor really subtle signs, like tension creeping into her shoulders or slight changes in her breathing during high-pressure negotiations. Those were her cues that she was approaching the edge of her window. Recognizing them allowed her to use regulation techniques before she felt overwhelmed.
Let's break it down. Thinking about specific emotions, anger often shows up as muscle tension, maybe a faster heart rate. What's a regulated response?
Could be something like tactical breathing slow, controlled breaths, or physical grounding techniques focusing on your feet on the floor, for example.
Okay. Anxiety, often shallow breathing, racing thoughts.
Progressive muscle relaxation can be great there. Tensing and releasing muscle groups, or cognitive reframing, consciously changing the thoughts fueling the anxiety.
What about feeling completely overwhelmed, scattered attention, fatigue?
Sometimes it's about modifying your environment, stepping away for a few minutes, or systematic prioritization, breaking down overwhelming tasks into smaller steps.
Even positive emotions like excitement, sometimes that can be overwhelming too, right? Increased energy, talking fast.
Absolutely. The goal there is to channel that energy, turn it into focused, productive expression rather than letting it become scattered or frantic.
And that pause method we talked about for self-awareness is foundational here too, for regulation.
It really is.
Yeah.
Pause, acknowledge, understand, select, engage. It works for both. Plus, you can actively influence your body's stress response directly. Stress releases cortisol, which impairs your PFC, your rational thinking. But techniques like controlled breathing activate your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your body's rest and digest system. It actively calms you down. Strategic movement, even just a short walk, helps process those stress hormones too.
You also mentioned heart rate variability, HRV, as a metric for resilience.
Yes, HRV is fascinating. Think of it as a measure of your nervous system's flexibility or agility. A higher HRV generally means you're better able to adapt to stress and bounce back quickly. It's a tangible biological marker of your emotional resilience. And simple practices like coherence, breathing those slow, rhythmic breaths, can actually train your system over time, improving your HRV.
Wow. And then there's emotional granularity. That sounds powerful.
It really is. It's the ability to get really precise in identifying and labeling your emotional experiences. So instead of just saying, I feel stressed, you might distinguish between, say, anticipatory anxiety about a deadline, frustration with a setback, or maybe disappointment about an outcome. That level of precision allows for much more targeted and effective regulation strategies. It's like moving from a blurry map to a high-resolution one of your inner world.
You can even use anticipatory regulation, preparing before the challenge hits.
Absolutely. Matthew, the sales director example, he used to have significant presentation anxiety. He learned to combine physical exercise beforehand, visualization techniques, and strategic planning. He essentially prepared his emotional state as much as his presentation content. And he saw a huge improvement, something like 40% better effectiveness, because he channeled that anxiety into focused energy before he even started.
Culture plays a role here too, doesn't it?
Always. In a Japanese business setting where emotional restraint is often highly valued, subtle mindful breathing might be a more appropriate regulation technique than, say, very visible calming gestures. Whereas in Brazil, perhaps channeling that emotional energy into enthusiastic, passionate engagement might be more effective and accepted. The key is combining both physical and cognitive regulation strategies in a culturally sensitive way.
And in professional settings, this mastery is just crucial. That example of the product team facing a pre-launch crisis.
Right. Instead of letting panic take over, the project manager models calm. They create a brief pause, maybe encourage everyone to use a quick regulation technique they've practiced. Then they lead focused problem solving. That doesn't just manage the crisis, it transforms potential conflict into productive collaboration. It builds trust under pressure.
And decision-making under pressure directly benefits.
Hugely. Leaders who can maintain their emotional equilibrium simply make more accurate, more effective decisions when the stakes are high. Emotional regulation preserves your mental clarity. It counteracts how stress naturally narrows your attention and can impair memory. It keeps your full cognitive toolkit available.
And the impact on relationships.
Profound. When you consistently demonstrate emotional mastery, you create psychological safety. People feel safer to speak up, to share concerns, to offer feedback, to innovate. It fosters trust and open communication.
So different situations need different approaches. Crisis management versus strategic planning.
Definitely. Crisis management often requires rapid, in-the-moment techniques. Tactical breathing, like those ER doctors use between intense cases. Short, sharp resets. Strategic planning, on the other hand, allows for more deliberate practices. You can build in time for deeper emotional processing and reflection. And team leadership is unique because you're not just regulating yourself. You're actively influencing the entire team's emotional climate by modeling effective strategies and creating that safe space.
And it bears repeating, the goal isn't an emotionless state. Passion drives innovation, right? Concern highlights real issues.
Exactly. It's about managing emotions productively and strategically expressing them in ways that have a positive impact, that move things forward constructively.
For making this sustainable, you suggest thinking of emotional energy like a renewable resource. Needs replenishment.
Yes, absolutely. Your recovery strategy needs multiple layers. First, immediate recovery. After an intense meeting or event, take a few minutes for structured decompression, maybe some movement, deep breathing, a quick journal entry. Second, daily maintenance. This is about the fundamentals. Getting enough sleep, regular exercise, some form of mental rest, and importantly, clear boundaries between work and personal life. And third, weekly integration. Taking some time each week to review emotional challenges and successes. What worked, what didn't? How can I refine my strategies for next week?
And consistent practice strengthens those neural pathways.
Right.
Makes it easier over time.
That's the power of neuroplasticity. It compounds.
It's not about achieving perfect robotic control. It's about developing a flexible, nuanced, and increasingly resilient approach to navigating your own emotional world.
Okay, now let's shift gears. We've talked self-awareness, Self-regulation. Now, empathy. This is where emotional intelligence really becomes relational, isn't it? Moving from your inner world to connecting with others. Precisely. It's about genuinely recognizing and responding to the emotional realities of the people around you. And in high-performing teams, empathy isn't just a nice thing, it's a massive strategic asset. Trust deepens, collaboration flows more easily, problem-solving becomes more fluid when people feel truly seen and understood.
The science behind it is pretty cool too, with mirror neurons.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Your brain literally has these mirror neurons that create a kind of neural echo. They allow you to feel a shadow, a resonance of what someone else is experiencing. It's why you might physically wince when you see someone stub their toe. You're having a low-level simulation of their experience in your own brain.
And there's an important distinction here between cognitive and affective empathy.
Yes, crucial distinction.
Yeah.
Cognitive empathy is understanding intellectually. I get why you feel that way. You comprehend their perspective. Affective empathy is feeling with them, experiencing a shared emotional resonance. I feel what you're feeling. Both are vital, but they serve different functions. You need the understanding and sometimes the shared feeling.
And stress impacts our ability to be empathetic.
Significantly. Stress tends to narrow our focus inward, making it harder to tune in to others. This really underscores why emotional regulation is a prerequisite for effective empathy. You absolutely have to manage your own emotional state before you can be truly present and connect effectively with someone else's. You can't pour from an empty cup, as they say.
Psychological safety comes up again here, that concept from Amy Edmondson. Empathy fuels it.
Directly. Empathetic environments are where psychological safety thrives. When team members feel genuinely understood, valued, not judged for their feelings or perspectives, they take more creative risks, they share information more openly, they challenge constructively, they innovate more freely, and the data consistently shows this leads to higher team performance, better decisions, and a more resilient, adaptive culture.
So building empathy isn't passive. It requires active engagement, perspective taking.
Absolutely, especially in conflict resolution. Your ability to genuinely see and crucially acknowledge multiple viewpoints, even if you don't agree with them, is often the key to finding sustainable solutions. It moves you beyond just defending your own position.
And empathetic awareness starts with noticing the subtle stuff, beyond just the obvious facial expressions.
Yes, train yourself to look deeper. Notice those fleeting micro-expressions. Changes in voice tone or pace modulation. Look at body language clusters, not just isolated gestures. Even shifts in the environment or the specific language pattern someone uses can offer clues. It's basically extending those self-observation skills outward, becoming a more finely tuned emotional antenna for the people around you.
Like Rachel, the product manager, dealing with resistance from her engineering team.
Exactly. Her first step wasn't arguing her case. It was regulating her own frustration and defensiveness. Then she used active, empathetic listening. She created a space where the engineers felt safe enough to share their underlying concerns, their fears. That didn't just diffuse the immediate tension. It led to a better hybrid solution that incorporated their insights. It strengthened the product and team cohesion. That's empathy driving real, practical business outcomes.
And at an organizational level, empathy can be built into systems, like feedback.
Yes, empathy-driven feedback systems completely change the game. They prioritize understanding the person's context and perspective before delivering the evaluation. The focus shifts naturally towards development and growth rather than simply judgment. It feels supportive, not punitive.
And it impacts retention, you said.
Strongly. We consistently see that employee retention correlates highly with employees feeling understood and valued by their leaders and peers. Organizations that score high on empathy metrics generally show significantly lower turnover rates and, interestingly, higher innovation metrics. This really blows up that old, outdated idea that being empathetic somehow compromises professional effectiveness or toughness. The opposite is true. It enhances effectiveness.
What about in our virtual world? It's harder to read cues, right?
Much harder. Video calls, emails, instant messages, they filter out so many of those subtle nonverbal cues, so you have to compensate consciously. Be more explicit in expressing your own emotions and intentions in writing. Schedule dedicated video check-ins just for connection, not just tasks. Intentionally create virtual spaces, maybe dedicated channels or short virtual coffee breaks, for informal, empathetic connection to happen. You have to build it in.
Makes sense. You have to be more intentional.
Exactly. So as you think about your next challenging conversation, maybe one you're dreading, how might you approach it with a more intentional empathy? Remember, true empathy isn't just about understanding in your head. It's that potent combination of understanding with compassionate action.
Okay, let's connect this all to communication, because miscommunication is so common, so costly, and often it's not really about a lack of information, is it? It's more about a lack of emotional clarity or connection.
Precisely. Emotionally intelligent communication goes way beyond just the words you choose. It actively considers tone of voice, body language, the timing of the message, the context, the relationship. All of it matters.
So before you even speak, an emotionally intelligent communicator does a kind of internal check.
Yes, a crucial pre-communication check. Building right on that pause method. You quickly assess your own emotional state. Are you calm? Triggered? You regulate any emotions that might interfere with clear communication. And you consciously consider the recipient's perspective, their likely emotional state, their context. Doing that creates a much stronger foundation for an impactful, constructive exchange.
It's like the message has two channels,
Hmm.
the explicit content and the emotional resonance.
That's a great way to put it. Think of the words as the melody, maybe. But emotional intelligence provides the harmony, the richness, the feeling that completes the composition. And this is never more crucial than in difficult, high-stakes conversations.
Like James, the project manager, dealing with that missed deadline meeting.
Right. Instead of going in confrontational, he first centered himself, used some tactical breathing. Then he applied empathy. He deliberately created space for his team to share their challenges, their roadblocks, their concerns, without fear of blame. The result wasn't just getting the project back on track. It was collaborative problem solving, renewed motivation, and actually stronger team relationships coming out of a potential crisis.
So emotionally intelligent communication really shifts the dynamic in key situations, like feedback.
Absolutely. Feedback moves from maybe being blunt, purely task-focused, to being contextual, relationship-aware. And guess what? It gets implemented far more often.
Conflict.
Instead of rushing straight to solutions, you prioritize understanding the emotions involved first. Paradoxically, this often leads to faster, more sustainable resolution because you address the underlying issues.
Crisis communication.
It shifts from just dumping information on people to providing calibrated emotional support alongside the facts. This builds team cohesion when it's needed most.
Team discussions.
They evolve from being solely driven by efficiency, let's just get through the agenda, to focusing on psychological safety and deep engagement. And that's where the truly innovative ideas often emerge.
How do you achieve that precision you mentioned? Words having emotional weight.
It's about being mindful of the impact. Instead of a vague, potentially blaming statement like, I'm frustrated, try something more specific and constructive, like, I'm feeling concerned about our timeline because I really want to ensure we deliver top quality work for this client. See the difference? It provides context, it reveals your underlying values, quality, and it opens a dialogue rather than potentially shutting it down.
And those mirror neurons pop up again in language matching, adapting your style.
Yes. Unconsciously, we often adapt our communication style, pace, tone, even word choice to match the emotional state of the person we're talking to. When done consciously and ethically, this isn't manipulation. It's about intentionally creating emotional resonance, building rapport on a much deeper level.
What about vulnerability? That seems tricky in a professional setting.
It can be, but strategic vulnerability is powerful. Emotional intelligence helps you discern when showing some vulnerability will actually strengthen trust and the relationship. It helps you figure out how much is appropriate to share and how to frame it professionally so it builds connection without undermining your credibility or oversharing.
And active listening.
Yeah.
It's more than just nodding and eye contact, isn't it?
Oh, much more. Think of it as a whole ecosystem. It involves your physical presence, being attentive, emotional attunement, sensing the feelings behind the words, cognitive processing, actually understanding the content, and cultural awareness, interpreting cues correctly. When all those elements align, you can sometimes achieve what scientists call limbic resonance.
Limbic resonance. What's that?
It's that rare but powerful feeling of deep emotional synchronization with another person. You're so in tune, you almost feel a shadow of their experience. It creates incredible trust and understanding. Like Sarah, the sales director, who used breath control to stay centered and actively tracked her client's emotional state during a really tense negotiation. That allowed her to respond with empathy at critical moments, turning a potential deal breaker into a strengthened long-term partnership.
Virtual communication again needs extra effort.
Absolutely mandatory. You have
Yeah.
to actively compensate for those missing nonverbal cues. Pay much closer attention to nuances in voice tone on calls. Notice the background environment on video. Be mindful of response timing in texts or emails. What might that signal? And actively check for understanding much more frequently. Does that make sense? How does that land with you, you have to ask?
Even silence can be a tool.
A very strategic one. Emotional intelligence helps you distinguish between a comfortable, reflective silence and an awkward, tense one. It allows you to use silence purposefully, maybe, to give someone space to process emotion, to build a little dramatic tension before an important point, or simply to encourage others to contribute.
Oh, okay. So thinking about that next difficult dialogue you might have, what's one thing that stands out about how you could approach it differently using these ideas?
It really comes down to realizing it's less about crafting the perfect words and much more about showing up with clarity about your own state, genuine presence for the other person, and a clear, constructive intention.
Right. Let's bring this all together now at the leadership level, because leadership fundamentally isn't just about being in charge, is it? It's about genuinely taking care of the people in your charge.
Well said. And scaling emotional intelligence from your own individual practice to having an organizational impact, that's really the defining trait of the most effective leaders today. The data is compelling. Those Gallup surveys showing companies with emotionally intelligent leaders achieving 4 times higher retention, 25% greater productivity. Those aren't small numbers.
A significant impact.
It's huge. And this is where it gets truly transformative, I think.
Yeah.
Leading diverse teams through complex challenges, navigating different perspectives with emotional clarity and composure. Think about global teams. An emotionally intelligent leader doesn't just react impulsively when conflict arises from cultural misunderstandings. They pause, they reflect, they create space for dialogue, seeking to understand first. They turn potential conflicts into powerful opportunities for deeper collaboration and learning.
So that foundation for an emotionally intelligent leader rests on those 4 pillars we've been discussing.
Exactly. Let's recap them. 1, self-aware leadership. Really understanding how your own emotional states ripple outwards and impact your team's dynamics. 2, regulated response. Maintaining your balance and composure during crises while still genuinely acknowledging and validating your team's concerns. Not being robotic, but being steady. 3, empathetic engagement. Not just being empathetic yourself, but actively creating systems and a culture that foster empathetic connections throughout the entire organization. And 4, communication synergy. Intentionally integrating emotional intelligence into all your communication frameworks, ensuring information flows effectively and resonates emotionally.
And modern leadership needs to blend emotional data with the analytical stuff.
Absolutely essential. You can't make truly comprehensive decisions based only on spreadsheets or only on gut feeling. Think of Elena leading that market strategy pivot. She didn't just analyze the market data, she also assessed her team's readiness for change, the potential cultural implications, the emotional undercurrents. Integrating both allowed her to navigate the strategic change while maintaining motivation and morale.
Global leadership adds another layer of complexity.
It demands even greater emotional intelligence. You have to constantly adapt your approach to diverse cultural expectations around emotional expression, communication styles, hierarchy. How a Japanese team member interprets direct feedback might be vastly different from how a Brazilian colleague perceives it. An effective global leader understands and navigates those nuances with sensitivity.
And psychological safety is the cornerstone here.
The absolute cornerstone. Creating an environment where team members feel safe enough to take interpersonal risks. Safe to speak up with a half-formed idea. Safe to challenge the status quo respectfully. Safe to admit a mistake without fear of humiliation or punishment. And let's be clear, this is not soft management. It directly impacts the bottom line through increased innovation, higher productivity, greater resilience, boosted engagement, and lower turnover.
So how do leaders actively build that safety?
It starts with their own behavior. Consistent emotional presence being predictable and steady. Appropriate vulnerability showing you're human too. Then, it's about implementing systems. Feedback processes that honor emotional experiences, not just task performance. Team rituals that deliberately build connection and trust. Creating dedicated spaces, formal or informal, for authentic dialogue. This framework then enables real innovation because people feel safe enough to take those emotional risks involved in trying something new, and you celebrate the learning even when things don't work out perfectly.
Like Anna, the product development leader.
Yes, her implementing simple emotional check-ins at the start of meetings, creating those safe spaces for concerns. Within 6 months, her team's innovation metrics jumped 45%, Collaboration improved 60%. Small changes, big impact. And when trust inevitably gets damaged, as it sometimes does, emotional intelligence helps leaders navigate the repair process. It involves acknowledging both the rational facts and the emotional impact of the breach, then co-creating structured, empathetic paths forward.
And the leader's own emotional state is contagious.
Highly contagious. It's called emotional contagion. Your mood, your stress levels, your enthusiasm, they significantly influence your team's collective state and performance. Understanding these patterns allows you to deliberately shape team dynamics. And interestingly, positive emotional states tend to spread more effectively and widely in environments that already have high psychological safety.
Which brings up emotional coherence for leaders. Managing expression while staying authentic.
Right. It's a balancing act. Consciously managing how you express your emotions to have the desired impact while still being genuine. Think of David during that tough product launch with technical issues. He didn't pretend everything was fine, nor did he panic. He acknowledged the problems with calm confidence. That allowed his team to process their own concerns productively, stay focused on finding solutions rather than getting pulled into a negative emotional spiral.
And conflict becomes collaboration.
Emotionally intelligent leadership transforms conflict. Instead of avoiding it or letting it fester, you create structured processes that allow for safe emotional expression during disagreements, leading to more constructive collaborative outcomes.
You also mentioned recognizing emotional labor.
Yes, this is important and often overlooked. It's the often invisible effort people expend managing their own and others' emotions to maintain relationships, support team cohesion, and ensure smooth functioning, especially crucial in customer-facing or high-stress roles. Our recognition systems, promotions, bonuses, praise need to evolve beyond just traditional metrics to truly value this vital contribution to psychological safety, team health, and cross-cultural competence.
And ultimately, this leads to more sustainable motivation.
Exactly. When leadership fosters an environment where individual values can align with organizational goals, where people feel seen, understood, and supported emotionally, you get deep, sustainable motivation. You see less burnout, much higher engagement, and the downstream effects are clear. Increased team innovation, smoother cross-functional collaboration, higher employee satisfaction scores, and dramatically improved ability to navigate organizational change effectively.
Okay, so wrapping up, emotional intelligence clearly isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a continuous practice, right? A lifelong journey.
Absolutely. It's a skill set you cultivate over time.
You've now got this powerful toolkit.
Mm.
Self-awareness, emotional regulation, empathy, emotionally intelligent communication. The crucial next step is embedding these skills into your daily rhythm, your habits, how you actually lead meetings, how you give feedback day to day, how you navigate disagreements, how you support your team's growth.
And that gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it consistently, well, it can be surprisingly wide. The key to bridging it is focusing on progressive integration through micro habits. Small, consistent actions. Remember neuroplasticity? Your brain changes with intentional practice. Those neural pathways get stronger. Like Alex, the tech executive. He added a simple 5-minute habit stack to his morning. A few minutes of tactical breathing, jotting down one emotional observation. Small investment, noticeable impact on his decision-making all day.
And that sustainable growth involves those 3 tiers again: immediate recovery, daily maintenance, weekly integration.
Yes, thinking about it that way helps structure your practice. Immediate recovery after intense moments. Daily maintenance like sleep, check-ins, weekly review to learn and adjust. And look for habit bridges, ways to link new EQ practices to existing routines, like pairing a quick emotional scan with your morning coffee, or doing a minute of coherence breathing every time you ride the elevator. Make it easy to remember.
Professional environments require that sophisticated integration, like Randy, the project manager.
Right. She started reviewing her team members' recent challenges and setting specific emotional engagement intentions before each meeting. How does she want to show up for this person? What support might they need? That proactive step boosted her team's collaboration effectiveness by 40%. Even feedback frameworks can evolve. Think emotional impact matrices, considering not just the task feedback, but the likely immediate and long-term emotional implications, adapting your delivery for different individuals and cultures.
Cross-functional collaboration seems like a key area where this really pays off.
Huge potential there. Teams that establish shared practices around emotional intelligence, maybe regular cross-team emotional check-ins, developing a shared vocabulary for talking about challenges safely, creating safe spaces across departments, they consistently show better innovation and much faster problem resolution because trust is higher.
And this practice needs to keep evolving, especially with things like AI.
Definitely. As AI takes over more routine tasks, our uniquely human skills like empathy become even more valuable. We need to consciously balance AI's efficiency with human connection. Maybe reserve particularly sensitive conversations or feedback for face-to-face or video engagement, not just email or chat. Maria, the technical leader using emotional insight maps, that's about finding new ways to decode unspoken team anxieties and scale authentic, empathetic leadership, even as teams get larger and more complex.
So the key takeaway. Emotional intelligence isn't some kind of checklist to tick off. It's really a way of being, a way of engaging with yourself and the world. And it deepens through reflection, through consistency, through just being present. Progress isn't measured by achieving perfection, but maybe by how often you remember to return to those core practices. Pausing before reacting, listening with real intention, leading with empathy.
Beautifully put. So the final question for everyone listening. What's one single micro habit related to emotional intelligence? Just one small thing that you can commit to integrating into your day starting today to help you lead better and stress less.
That's a powerful question to end on indeed. Until next time, keep diving deep.